The dust cloud on the horizon spelled trouble for Selena Vaughn, who clutched her feverish 4-year-old daughter Emma against her chest as they huddled by the broken wagon wheel. The merciless New Mexico sun of 1878 beat down upon them. 3 days stranded with dwindling water and no sign of her husband returning from his desperate search for help. Selena's once fine blue dress was torn and filthy, her dark hair falling loose from its pins as she dabbed a dampened cloth against Emma's forehead. The child whimpered softly, her normally bright eyes glazed with sickness as Selena whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "Hush now, little one. Help will come. It will." But her voice cracked on the last words, betraying her fading hope. The rhythmic pounding of hoofbeats grew louder, and Selena squinted against the sunlight to make out the approaching rider. The silhouette of a man on horseback materialized through the heat waves, his broad shoulders and the distinct shape of his Stetson marking him unmistakably as a cowboy. As he drew closer, Selena instinctively pulled Emma tighter against her chest. Out here, strangers could mean salvation or doom, and she'd heard too many stories of bandits preying on vulnerable travelers. The rider slowed his chestnut stallion to a stop several paces from where she sat. Dust settled around them as he dismounted in one fluid motion that spoke of years in the saddle. He was tall, his face partially obscured by the shadow of his hat, but Selena could make out a strong jaw darkened by stubble and eyes that assessed her situation with unsettling intensity. "Madam," he said, his voice low and measured. His gaze moved from her face to the child in her arms, taking in the broken wagon wheel, the exhausted horse tethered nearby, and the meager supplies scattered around them. Selena swallowed hard. "Sir, if you could spare any water, where's your husband?" he interrupted, scanning the horizon. "Gone to find help. 3 days ago." She didn't add that she feared Thomas was dead, fallen prey to the elements, or worse, to the bands of outlaws known to roam these territories. The cowboy's expression hardened as he took in this information. He reached for his canteen, and Selena nearly wept with relief when he handed it to her. She helped Emma drink first before taking a modest sip herself. "Child's sick," he observed, crouching down to get a better look at Emma's flushed face. "Fever started yesterday," Selena confirmed, her voice trembling. "We were headed to Silver Creek. My husband has family there." The cowboy straightened up and looked toward the horizon, seemingly making a calculation. Then his eyes locked with hers, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "Stand up," he said firmly. "You're coming with me." Selena clutched Emma tighter. "I can't leave. My husband will return." "Madam, your child needs a doctor, and you're nearly out of water. Silver Creek's still 2 days' ride, and that's with a good horse and no brakes." His tone brooked no argument. "I've got a place about 4 hours from here. Clean water, medicine, shelter. You can wait for your husband there, but this little one won't last another day in this heat." Selena looked down at Emma's feverish face, then at their broken wagon and dwindling supplies. The decision crystallized in her mind with painful clarity. "What's your name?" she asked, needing at least this small assurance before entrusting their lives to a stranger. "Vaughn. Vincent Nolan." He extended a calloused hand to help her up. Selena gathered Emma in her arms and rose unsteadily, her legs cramping from sitting so long. "Selena Vaughn. This is Emma." Vincent nodded, then turned to gather what few supplies might be useful. He worked efficiently, securing her small trunk to his horse and fashioning a makeshift shade for Emma using his coat and some wooden slats from the wagon. "What about our things?" Selena asked, watching as he left most of their belongings behind. "I'll send someone back for what can be salvaged," he replied, though they both knew most would be picked clean by scavengers, human or otherwise, before anyone returned. Vincent mounted his horse first, then reached down to carefully take Emma from Selena's arms. The child whimpered but did not wake as he cradled her securely against his chest. Then he extended his hand again, pulling Selena up behind him with surprising gentleness. "Hold tight to me," he instructed as he urged his horse into a steady trot. Selena hesitated for just a moment before wrapping her arms around his waist. She was acutely aware of the impropriety of their position, but such concerns seemed trivial against the backdrop of Emma's illness and their desperate circumstances. As they rode away from the wagon, Selena cast one last glance back, silently praying that Thomas would somehow find them. But as the broken wagon disappeared into the distance, she couldn't help but feel she was leaving more than just their possessions behind. They rode in silence for nearly an hour, the landscape changing from dusty flats to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and juniper. Emma stirred occasionally in Vincent's arms, and each time, he would slow the horse and ask Selena if the child needed water. "You're good with her," Selena observed after one such stop, where Vincent had expertly balanced Emma while helping her drink from the canteen. "Had a little sister once," was all he said, his expression unreadable as he urged the horse forward again. The once hung in the air between them, and Selena did not press for more. Out here, everyone carried losses like hidden wounds. As the afternoon wore on, Selena found herself leaning more heavily against Vincent's back, exhaustion threatening to overcome her. The steady rhythm of the horse and the solid warmth of the man before her provided an unexpected comfort. "Stay awake, Mrs. Vaughn," Vincent's voice cut through her fatigue. "We're nearly there." Selena straightened, blinking away her drowsiness. "I'm sorry, no need to apologize. Just hold on a bit longer." True to his word, within the hour, a small homestead appeared in the distance. It wasn't grand by any means, a modest cabin with a barn and corral, nestled against the base of a hill with a small creek running nearby. But to Selena's weary eyes, it looked like salvation. As they approached, a door opened, and a woman stepped out onto the porch, shading her eyes against the sun. "Vincent Nolan, you bring trouble every time you come home," the woman called, but there was affection in her tone. "Mary needs help with this child," Vincent replied as he reined in his horse. "Fever's been on her for at least a day." The woman Mary moved quickly down the steps, her gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. She reached up for Emma, and Vincent carefully transferred the child into her waiting arms. "Poor little lamb," Mary murmured, assessing Emma with experienced eyes. "Bring her mother in too. She looks dead on her feet." Vincent dismounted and helped Selena down. Her legs buckled as they hit the ground, and he caught her effortlessly, one strong arm around her waist. "I'm fine," Selena insisted, embarrassed by her weakness. "Course you are," Mary said kindly. "Just need water, food, and rest in that order. Come along now." Inside, the cabin was simple but clean, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area. Mary directed Vincent to place Emma on a small bed in a side room while she set about gathering supplies. "Who is she?" Selena asked quietly as Vincent helped her to a chair at the wooden table. "Mary? She was my mother's friend. Helped raise me after." He trailed off, then simply said, "She's a healer. Good with herbs and such. Your daughter's in capable hands." Mary returned with a cup of cool water for Selena. "Drink slowly," she instructed. "Then I'll need your help with the little one." Over the next few hours, Selena assisted Mary in treating Emma's fever. They bathed the child in cool water infused with herbs, coaxed her to drink a bitter-tasting tea that Mary insisted would help, and finally managed to get her into a clean nightgown that had once belonged to Vincent's sister. All the while, Vincent made himself useful outside, seeing to his horse, bringing in water and firewood, and preparing a simple supper. When he returned to check on them, Selena noticed how his eyes softened when they fell on Emma, who was finally sleeping peacefully, her fever beginning to break. "She's strong," Mary told Selena as they watched the child sleep. "Like her mother." Selena shook her head. "I don't feel strong. If Mr. Nolan hadn't found us." "Vincent has a knack for being exactly where he's needed," Mary said with a small smile, though he'd never admit it. That evening, after a simple but filling meal, Mary showed Selena to a small bed in the corner of the main room. "You'll sleep here. I'll keep watch over Emma tonight." "I couldn't possibly. You're no good to your child if you collapse from exhaustion," Mary said firmly. "Rest. That's an order." Too tired to argue further, Selena reluctantly lay down. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Vincent sitting by the fire, his strong profile illuminated by the flames, his eyes watching over them all with quiet vigilance. Selena woke to the sound of hushed voices and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she was disoriented. Then memory rushed back: the broken wagon, Vincent's arrival, Emma's fever. She sat up quickly, scanning the room for her daughter. "She's still sleeping," Mary said, noting Selena's concern. "Fever's down considerably. Come, have some breakfast." Selena accepted a mug of coffee and a plate of eggs and biscuits, realizing only as she began to eat how ravenous she was. Vincent was nowhere to be seen. "He's checking the trails," Mary explained, seeming to read her thoughts. "Looking for signs of your husband." Hope and anxiety warred in Selena's chest. "Do you think he'll find him?" Mary's expression was carefully neutral. "Vincent's the best tracker in 3 counties. If there's anything to find, he will." After breakfast, Selena went to check on Emma and found her awake, her eyes clearer and her cheeks less flushed. The little girl's smile when she saw her mother was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Mama," Emma whispered, reaching out a small hand. "I'm here, sweet one." Selena gathered her daughter into her arms, tears of relief threatening to spill. "How do you feel?" "Thirsty," Emma replied, and Selena laughed softly, grateful for such an ordinary complaint. Mary helped Selena bathe Emma and dress her in a clean, if somewhat large, child's dress. "It was Vincent's sister's," Mary explained again as she rolled up the sleeves. "Kept it all these years, though God knows why." "What happened to her?" Selena asked carefully, sensing a story that needed telling. Mary's hands stilled for a moment. "Scarlet fever took her when she was 6. Took their mother too, not long after. Vincent was just 15. She resumed her work, adding, 'That's why he stopped when he saw your little one. Some ghosts never quite leave us.'" The revelation cast Vincent's actions in a new light. It wasn't just kindness that had prompted him to help them, it was a wound that had never fully healed. By midday, Emma was well enough to sit up and take some broth. Selena brought her out to the main room, where the child watched with fascination as Mary worked at various household tasks. The sound of hoofbeats announced Vincent's return. Selena's heart leapt to her throat as she hurried to the door, hoping against hope that he'd found Thomas or at least news of him. One look at Vincent's face told her everything. He dismounted slowly, his expression grave as he approached her. "I found tracks heading west from your wagon," he said without preamble. "Followed them as far as I could. They led to Rattlesnake Canyon." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. There was evidence of a fall, blood on the rocks below. Selena felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "You're saying he's dead?" "I'm saying it doesn't look good," Vincent corrected gently. "I found this caught on a branch partway down." He held out a scrap of fabric that Selena recognized instantly as part of Thomas's shirt. She took it with trembling fingers, the reality of what it meant washing over her in a cold wave. "I'll go back tomorrow, try to make it down to the canyon floor," Vincent offered. "But Mrs. Vaughn, the drop is steep, and there are scavengers in those parts." Selena nodded numbly, understanding what he wasn't saying explicitly. Even if Thomas had somehow survived the fall, injured and alone in that unforgiving terrain for days, she closed her eyes, feeling as though the ground were crumbling beneath her. "Mama." Emma's voice called from inside, and Selena straightened her shoulders, forcing composure she didn't feel. "Thank you for looking," she managed to say to Vincent before turning to go back inside to her daughter. That evening, after Emma had been put to bed, Selena sat alone on the porch, trying to process the likelihood that she was now a widow. The realization that she was alone in the world with a child to raise and no resources was overwhelming. Thomas had been taking them to his family in Silver Creek because they had nothing left in St. Louis after his business failed. The sound of the door opening behind her interrupted her thoughts. Vincent stepped out, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered one to her silently, then took a seat on the step beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Mary says the little one's doing much better," he said after a moment. Selena nodded, grateful for this neutral topic. "Yes, her fever's almost gone. Mary is quite skilled." "She is." Vincent took a sip of his coffee, his gaze on the distant mountains. "Mrs. Vaughn, I know this isn't the time for such discussions, but I feel I should ask about your plans." "Plans?" The word seemed almost laughable to Selena. What plans could she possibly make now? "Yes, madam. Silver Creek is still a 2-day ride, and from what you've said, you've never met your husband's family there. Do they know you were coming? Are they expecting you?" Selena stared into her coffee, the reality of her situation becoming clearer. "Thomas sent a letter, but I don't know if they received it. I don't even know if they'll welcome us, me and Emma, without him." Vincent nodded, seeming to have expected this answer. You're welcome to stay here until you decide. Mary could use the company, and he hesitated, then added more softly. The little one brings life to this place it hasn't seen in a long while. The offer was generous, perhaps too generous. Selena studied him in the fading light, trying to understand this quiet, serious man who had saved them and now offered them shelter with seemingly nothing expected in return. Why are you helping us, Mr. Nolan? He seemed surprised by the directness of her question. Would you rather I hadn't? No, of course not. But most men would have ridden past a stranded woman and child. Or worse. They both knew what worse could mean in these territories. Vincent was silent for a long moment. I told you I had a sister once. What I didn't tell you is that I wasn't there when she and my mother fell ill. I was off chasing some fool notion of adventure. His voice was low, tinged with an old regret. By the time I got word and made it home, they were already in the ground. He took another sip of his coffee before continuing. I've spent a lot of years trying to be where I'm needed since then. So when I saw you sitting in the dust beside your child, he shrugged, as if the rest was obvious. Selena felt a lump form in her throat at the simple honesty of his explanation. Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Truly. Vincent, he corrected gently. If you're staying a while, might as well use my given name. Vincent, she repeated, finding it felt right on her lips. Then you must call me Selena. They sat in companionable silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and stars began to pepper the vast sky. For the first time since the wagon wheel had broken, Selena felt the tightness in her chest ease slightly. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight they were safe. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Emma recovered quickly, her natural childish resilience asserting itself as she explored the cabin and yard under Mary's watchful eye. Selena helped with chores, cooking, cleaning, mending, grateful to be useful rather than simply a burden on their host's charity. Vincent returned to Rattlesnake Canyon as promised, but found no sign of Thomas, only confirmation that no one could have survived such a fall. He brought back what little he could salvage from their wagon as well, including the small box of keepsakes Selena had feared lost forever. A week passed, then another. Selena wrote to Thomas's family in Silver Creek, explaining what had happened and inquiring whether they would still welcome her and Emma. The letter would take time to reach them, and longer still for a reply to find its way back. In the meantime, life continued. Selena learned that Vincent was not just a cowboy but a rancher of modest means. He owned the small homestead and ran a herd of cattle on the surrounding land with the help of two ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse near the barn, older men named Pete and Jacob, who tipped their hats respectfully whenever they saw her. Vincent himself was often away during the days, checking on his cattle or handling various business matters in the nearby town of Rio Piedra. But he was always home by supper, and Selena found herself watching the horizon for his return each evening with an anticipation she didn't quite understand or perhaps didn't wish to examine too closely. One afternoon, while Emma napped and Mary was busy with her herbs, Selena decided to explore the small collection of books on the shelf in the main room. Among them, she found a worn copy of The Lady of the Lake by Sir Walter Scott. When she opened it, an inscription on the flyleaf caught her eye. To Vincent, may these words bring you comfort when I cannot. With all my love, Mother. That was hers. Vincent's voice came from behind her, startling Selena. She hadn't heard him return. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry, she said quickly, moving to return the book to its place. Vincent stepped closer, gently taking the volume from her hands. No need for apologies. She would have liked that someone was reading it again. He looked down at the inscription, his thumb brushing over the faded handwriting. She used to read this aloud in the evenings. Had a beautiful voice. The tenderness in his expression as he spoke of his mother touched something in Selena. You must miss her very much. Every day, he admitted, then with a small smile added, but not as painfully as I once did. Time doesn't heal all wounds, like they say, but it does make them easier to carry. His words resonated with Selena, who was still grappling with her own fresh grief. Does that mean, will it get easier? This feeling like part of me has been torn away. Vincent looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. Yes, not soon, and not all at once. But one morning, you'll wake up and realize you've gone a whole hour without that weight on your chest. Then a day. Then more. He carefully placed the book back on the shelf. And one day, You'll find you can remember the good without it being crushed by the pain of the loss. Selena hadn't realized she was crying until Vincent hesitantly reached out to brush a tear from her cheek. The simple gesture of comfort broke something loose inside her, and suddenly she was sobbing for Thomas, for their broken dreams, for the uncertain future facing her and Emma. Vincent didn't try to stop her tears or offer empty platitudes. He simply stood there, a solid presence, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder until the storm passed. "I'm sorry," Selena said when she could speak again, embarrassed by her display. "Don't be," Vincent replied. "Grief needs its voice." Later that evening, after Emma had been tucked in, Vincent brought out the book again. "Would you like me to read some?" he offered. "My mother always said poetry was good medicine for a troubled heart." Selena agreed, and so began a new evening ritual. After supper, when the chores were done and Emma was asleep, Vincent would read aloud while Selena mended or simply listened. Sometimes Mary joined them, her gnarled fingers busy with knitting, but often it was just the two of them, sharing the simple pleasure of words beautifully crafted. On one such evening, as Vincent's deep voice filled the room with Scott's romantic verses, Selena found herself watching him rather than her needlework. The firelight cast shadows across his strong features, softening them. He was not conventionally handsome, his face too weathered, his nose broken at some point in his past, but there was something compelling about him, a quiet strength that drew her gaze again and again. He looked up suddenly, catching her watching him, and Selena quickly dropped her eyes back to her sewing. But not before she saw something flicker in his expression, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire's glow. The next morning brought the first reply from Silver Creek. Selena's hands trembled as she broke the seal on the letter, aware that its contents would likely determine her and Emma's fate. The message inside was brief and cold. Thomas's brother expressed condolences for her loss, but explained that their family was struggling after several poor harvests. They could not possibly take in Thomas's widow and child, though they would pray for Providence to provide for them. Selena sat heavily in the chair, the letter crumpling in her grip. "Bad news?" Mary asked gently, pausing in her bread-making. "They won't have us," Selena said, her voice hollow. "They say they haven't the means." Mary's expression hardened slightly. "Means or not, family is family. But then, some folks use the Bible only when it suits them." She wiped her hands on her apron and came to sit opposite Selena. "What will you do now?" It was the question Selena had been avoiding. With no family of her own still living and now no hope from Thomas's relations, her options were painfully limited. She had some education enough to perhaps secure a position as a schoolteacher, but such jobs were scarce, especially for a woman with a young child in tow. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have a little money saved from what Thomas left, but not enough to establish us anywhere properly." Mary reached across the table to pat Selena's hand. "Well, there's no rush to decide. You and the little one aren't burdens here." When Vincent returned that evening and heard about the letter, his reaction was similar to Mary's, disgusted but not surprised. People can be cruel, especially when it comes to sharing what little they have, he said as they sat on the porch after supper. "But Mary's right. You can stay as long as you need." Selena looked out at the darkening landscape, the rolling hills and distant mountains that had begun to feel familiar. "I can't impose on your kindness indefinitely." "It's not an imposition," Vincent said quietly. "Having you and Emma here. It's been good for this place. Good for Mary." After a pause, he added more softly, "Good for me." Selena turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. In the fading light, his expression was earnest, almost vulnerable. "Vincent, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "Just know there's no rush for you to leave. And when you do decide what's next, I'll help however I can." His generosity was overwhelming, and Selena found herself fighting tears again. "Why are you so good to us?" Vincent was silent for a moment, then said simply, "Because it's what decent folks do. And because—" He trailed off, seeming to struggle with his next words. "Because—" Selena prompted, her heart beating faster for reasons she wasn't ready to acknowledge. "Because when I found you sitting in the dust beside your child, something told me you were meant to cross my path." He looked down at his hands, rough and calloused from years of hard work. "I'm not a man who believes much in fate, Selena, but I can't help feeling there was a purpose in our meeting." The honesty of his words touched her deeply. "I've felt that too," she admitted, "though I've been afraid to give it voice." Vincent looked up at her then, his eyes reflecting the first stars appearing in the evening sky. "There's no need to name it. No need to decide anything now. Time has its own way of making things clear." As autumn approached, bringing cooler days and earlier evenings, life at the homestead settled into a comfortable pattern. Selena took over much of the cooking, discovering that she had a talent for it that pleased both Vincent and Mary. Emma, fully recovered from her illness, followed Mary around like a shadow, absorbing the older woman's knowledge of plants and animals with childish enthusiasm. Selena still grieved for Thomas, but as Vincent had predicted, the sharp edges of her pain gradually softened. She found herself able to remember the good years of their marriage without being immediately overwhelmed by sorrow at his loss. And more often, she found her thoughts turning to Vincent, his quiet strength, his unexpected tenderness with Emma, the way his rare smile transformed his serious face into something that made her heart skip a beat. It was Mary who finally broached the subject one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen. "He cares for you, you know," the older woman said without preamble, her hands never pausing in their task of kneading dough. Selena nearly dropped the plate she was drying. "I'm sure he's just being kind." Mary snorted softly. "Vincent Nolan is a good man, but he's not one to extend himself beyond what's necessary out of mere kindness. Not like this." She gave Selena a knowing look. "And unless my eyes are failing worse than I thought, you care for him too." Selena couldn't deny it, not to Mary who saw everything. "It's too soon," she said instead. "Thomas has been gone barely 3 months. Time's different out here," Mary replied pragmatically. "Life's harder, shorter too often. People don't have the luxury of mourning for years like they do back east." She punched down the dough with perhaps more force than necessary. "Besides, would your Thomas want you and that child to be alone if there was a good man willing to care for you both?" The question lingered in Selena's mind long after their conversation ended. Would Thomas want this? The answer, she realized, was yes. Despite his faults, and there had been many in the later years as his business failures mounted, Thomas had loved her and Emma deeply. He would have wanted them safe, cared for, perhaps even happy again. But was that what Vincent wanted? He had been unfailingly kind, increasingly attentive, but he had never spoken directly of feelings beyond friendship. Perhaps Mary had misread his intentions. The opportunity to discover the truth came sooner than Selena expected. The next day, Vincent asked if she would accompany him to Rio Piedra. "There's a harvest festival," he explained. "Nothing fancy, but there'll be music, food, dancing. Emma might enjoy it, and—" He hesitated, then added, "It would be nice to show you something beyond this homestead." Selena accepted, ignoring Mary's knowing smile. The prospect of a day in town of music and festivity after so many months of hardship was too tempting to refuse. Rio Piedra proved to be a small but bustling settlement, its main street decorated with colorful bunting for the festival. Merchants had set up stalls selling everything from fresh produce to handcrafted goods, while a band played lively tunes in the town square, where couples danced with enthusiastic, if not always skillful steps. Emma was entranced by it all, her eyes wide as she took in the sights and sounds. Vincent lifted her onto his shoulders so she could see better, an action so natural and affectionate that it made Selena's heart swell. They spent the day exploring the festival, Vincent introducing Selena to various townspeople who greeted him with obvious respect. She was touched by how he consistently introduced her as Mrs. Vaughn, with a tone that discouraged any prying questions about her circumstances. As the afternoon waned, Vincent purchased a small carved wooden horse for Emma and a lovely embroidered shawl for Selena, despite her protests that it was too extravagant. "Please," he said, draping it around her shoulders. "It suits you." His fingers lingered slightly longer than necessary, and Selena felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the shawl's fabric. As evening approached, lanterns were lit throughout the square, casting a golden glow over the continuing festivities. The band struck up a slower tune, and couples moved closer together on the makeshift dance floor. Vincent glanced at Selena, then at Emma, who was happily watching the musicians with rapt attention. "Would you care to dance?" he asked, his voice slightly uncertain. Selena hesitated, aware that dancing with Vincent in public would be a statement of sorts to the townspeople. But Emma gave her no time to overthink, saying, "Go dance, Mama. I'll watch right here." Vincent smiled at the child, then offered his hand to Selena. "Just one dance." She placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses that spoke of his hard work, the gentle strength with which he guided her to the edge of the dancing area. He placed one hand respectfully at her waist, holding her other hand in a proper dance position that nevertheless felt surprisingly intimate. "I should warn you, I'm not very practiced at this," Vincent said as they began to move with the music. "You're doing fine," Selena assured him, though in truth, she was barely noticing his dancing. She was too aware of his nearness, the clean scent of soap and leather that she had come to associate with him, the careful way he held her close enough to lead, but not so close as to cause gossip. As they danced, Selena found herself studying his face in the lantern light. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something between tenderness and uncertainty. "Selena," he said finally, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "There's something I've been wanting to say to you." Her heart quickened. "Yes. I know it's not been long since you lost your husband. I know your grief is still fresh." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "But I find myself thinking of you and Emma in ways that go beyond just wanting to help." Selena's breath caught in her throat. "What ways, Vincent?" He guided her through a gentle turn before answering. "Ways that make me hope you might consider staying. Not just for now, but permanently." "As your housekeeper?" Selena asked, needing to be certain of his meaning. A flush crept up Vincent's neck. "No, as my wife." The words came out in a rush, as though he'd been holding them back for too long. "I know it's too soon to speak of such things, and I don't expect an answer now. I just wanted you to know that if you're ever ready, I would be honored to call you my wife and Emma my daughter." The music continued around them, but Selena barely heard it, her mind reeling from Vincent's declaration. It was too soon, her heart still tender with grief, and yet. "Vincent, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything now," he assured her quickly. "I don't want to press you or make you uncomfortable. I wanted you to know where I stand." The music ended before Selena could formulate a response. Vincent escorted her back to where Emma waited, his hand warm at the small of her back. The moment had passed, but his words lingered in her mind throughout the remainder of the evening. On the ride home, with Emma asleep between them in the wagon, Vincent maintained a respectful silence on the subject. But as he helped Selena down from the wagon at the homestead, he said quietly, "I meant what I said earlier. Take all the time you need. I'll wait." In the days that followed, Selena found herself watching Vincent more closely, seeing him with new eyes. She noticed the gentle way he always greeted Emma in the mornings, lifting her up to check if she'd grown overnight. She saw how he worked from dawn until dusk, ensuring the ranch prospered, even as he found time each evening to read aloud or simply sit with them by the fire. She observed his quiet dignity when dealing with the occasional difficult customer or neighbor, his fairness with Pete and Jacob, his patience with Mary's sometimes sharp tongue. In 1,000 small ways, Vincent revealed himself to be exactly the kind of man any woman would be fortunate to have as a husband and any child blessed to have as a father. And gradually, Selena acknowledged to herself what her heart already knew. She was falling in love with Vincent Nolan. The realization brought both joy and guilt. Joy at the prospect of a second chance at happiness. Guilt that she could feel such emotions so soon after Thomas's death. But as the autumn deepened toward winter, Selena came to accept that loving Vincent did not diminish what she had shared with Thomas. It was not a replacement, but a new chapter, unexpected, but no less precious for its surprise. One evening in late November, as the first snow of the season dusted the landscape in white, Selena found Vincent alone on the porch, staring out at the darkened ranch. "May I join you?" she asked, pulling her shawl, the one he had bought her at the festival, tighter around her shoulders. "Always," he replied, moving slightly to make room for her on the bench. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the snowflakes dance in the lantern light. "I've been thinking about what you said," Selena began, her heart pounding. "At the festival." Vincent turned to look at her, his expression carefully neutral. "Have you?" "Yes." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I know that Thomas would want Emma and me to be happy." And these past months with you have brought more happiness than I thought possible after what happened." Hope flickered in Vincent's eyes, but he remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "What I'm trying to say, Vincent, is that I would be honored to be your wife. Not immediately, I still need some time, but I don't want to wait too long either. Life is too uncertain, too precious to waste." The smile that spread across Vincent's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Selena," he breathed, reaching for her hand. "Are you certain?" She nodded, threading her fingers through his. "I'm certain that I love you. I'm certain that Emma adores you. And I'm certain that I want us to be a family." Vincent lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I love you, Selena Vaughn. I think I have since I found you sitting in the dust beside your child." The memory of that desperate day now transformed into something almost sacred, the beginning of their story rather than the end of another. "When spring comes," Selena said softly, "when the land wakes up again, that's when we should marry." Vincent nodded, his eyes shining with a joy that matched her own. Spring it is. Winter passed in a flurry of preparations and growing anticipation. Vincent added a room to the cabin for Emma, and together they planned improvements to make the homestead more comfortable for their expanded family. Mary watched their happiness with satisfaction, occasionally reminding them that she had seen it coming all along. Emma, delighted by the news that Mr. Vincent would be her new papa, threw herself into wedding preparations with childish enthusiasm, collecting wildflowers whenever the snow receded enough for them to grow and practicing her role as flower girl with solemn dedication. As the days lengthened and the first green shoots pushed through the melting snow, Selena felt her heart lightening with the season. The grief for Thomas would always be part of her, but it no longer defined her. Instead, she looked forward with hope and joy to the life she would build with Vincent. They were married on the first truly warm day of spring, in a simple ceremony in Rio Piedra's small church. Selena wore a new dress of pale blue silk that Vincent had ordered all the way from Santa Fe, while Emma scattered petals down the aisle with careful precision, her face alight with importance and happiness. The entire town turned out for the celebration afterward, everyone eager to welcome the new Mrs. Nolan and her daughter properly into their community. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and through it all, Vincent never strayed far from Selena's side, his pride and love evident in every glance. "Are you happy, Mrs. Nolan?" he asked as they took a moment alone amid the festivities. Selena looked up at him, at this man who had saved her in more ways than one, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude and love. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. That night, after they had returned to the homestead and Emma had been tucked into bed with stories of the day's excitement, Vincent led Selena to their room, no longer his alone, but theirs together. With gentle hands and whispered words of love, he showed her what it meant to be truly cherished, their union blessed with both passion and tenderness. As they lay together afterward, Selena rested her head on Vincent's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" he asked, stroking her hair. "For stopping that day. For saying, 'Stand up, you're coming with me.' For saving us." Vincent tilted her face up to his eyes serious in the dim light. "You saved me too, Selena. I was just existing before you came. Now I'm living again." 1 year to the day after Vincent had found Selena and Emma stranded by their broken wagon, they stood together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Emma played nearby, her laughter carrying on the evening breeze as she chased fireflies in the yard. Selena leaned against her husband's strong shoulder, her hand resting on the slight swell of her belly where their child, a son, Mary insisted, though how she could know such things remained a mystery, grew steadily stronger each day. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you hadn't come along that road when you did?" Selena asked. Vincent's arm tightened around her waist. "I try not to. Some things are too painful to contemplate, even as possibilities that never came to pass." Selena nodded, understanding completely. Instead, she focused on the blessings that had flowed from that fateful encounter, her daughter's health restored, her own heart healed and reopened to love, the child they had created together now growing within her, and the lifetime of days stretching before them, filled with promise and purpose. I love you, Vincent Nolan, she said simply. And I love you, Selena Nolan, he replied, bending to place a gentle kiss on her lips. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they called Emma to come inside. The three of them soon to be for moving together into the warmth and light of the home they had built not just of timber and stone, but of courage, compassion, and love that had been born in the most unlikely of circumstances. A chance meeting on a dusty road where a desperate mother sat in the dust beside her child, and a lonely cowboy found the family his heart had always sought.